Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Alexis Ortega, and I am one of 3 co-chairs for the CVRA, which stands for the California Voting Rights Act Working Group, as a function of cooperating with the subcommittee, which is Jeff Kors and Lisa Middleton, our city council members. And so we're a group of residents who are at the table involved in these discussions with regards to this entire process. A little bit about the purpose of our group. So as I mentioned, we are a group of local residents. We all live in Palm Springs, and we are here to inform the subcommittee, the lovely folks at the table here, of residents' concerns, to be engaged as part of this process going forward. Personally, for me, to be a resource, right? We have 5 city council members. That's not a lot, but we have an extension of the work happening through the working group. So I would like to ask those of us who are part of the working group if you would like to just raise your hand and just let folks know. So I don't have the numbers off the top of my head of how many of us there are, but there are several of us, and so please use us as a resource in addition to the elected folks and city staff. And I think that's all that I will say. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for those of you who are here today. There are some documents out in the front in case you didn't see them or get a chance to grab them. Let someone know, and I can go up and grab them. So we have the presentation that Anthony will give today, and I'll let the city council members let you know what else is on the agenda today. But thank you so much for being here.
Again, thank you for coming out tonight, and this is very informal. So you've been to many city council meetings. We are going to mostly be listening to you. We've got some presentations that we're going to make, and unlike city council meetings, you can come up and tell us this is what I think, or you can ask questions, or you can do a combination of both. We don't have any time limits on how long individuals can speak, other than we ask that you respect all of the other people in the room who might have a desire to speak by not taking more than your fair share of time. But this process is a significant change for our city. We have traditionally been electing individuals at large across the entire city. The California State Legislature very clearly identified that at-large voting has been used by a number of cities to disenfranchise, in particular, minority voters. And that has happened in multiple cities, in multiple places. There are folks who will argue whether it has or has not happened in Palm Springs, but the state legislature made a decision over 20 years ago that it was happening frequently enough in California that they put their thumb on the scales and said, we want cities to begin moving to at-district elections so that individuals represent individual districts in their cities. When we received notice in Palm Springs that we were subject to litigation if we did not move to districts, our city takes an awful lot of pride in our attention to inclusiveness, our mission of being an inclusive city. And one of the things that I think, after a couple of days of reflection, all of us on city council found ourselves saying is, Palm Springs wants to be the kind of city that is an example of how to do this right, that we want to walk the walk that we have been talking for all of these many years and make sure that we do the things that we have to do to make districts work. We then had a unanimous vote of the city council to move to districts. We were able to negotiate with the attorney representing the plaintiffs an extension of time so that rather than having to get this all completed by next Thursday, we were able to get an extension of time through the end of this year. And we got that because we were committed to making this process work. We're required to have 4 public hearings. We're going to have 4 meetings this week and many more to follow after that. So thank you for coming out. It's warm, but we are going to stay here until you're finished talking and finished answering questions.
Thank you, Lisa. And again, also want to thank everyone for being here. Want to acknowledge our Mayor Robert Moon and Councilmember Christy Holstage are here. Because of the Brown Act, they're not allowed to talk. So you have to direct questions to us as the subcommittee, but I think everyone on council wants to hear from the public, and so I really appreciate both of them being here so they get the same input we get. We are recording this and live streaming it, and it'll be on the website, so it will give an opportunity for people who can't make it to learn about this and hear the input from the public. And we'll get a lot more into the presentation. Really thank Alexis for offering to help facilitate this on the working group. There are 9 members of the working group. And the working group, we really want people, you know, if you want to reach out to Lisa and I, the city clerk with questions, any council member, you should feel free to reach out to with your input. And that will eventually all get to council. But sometimes people are more comfortable reaching out to members of the working group, right? Obviously, this impacts the 5 members of council, since we're going to be creating districts for the council members. So the working group is another vehicle for people to reach out to, and I really appreciate, just by name, Dixie Miller, who's on it, who's here, who I think a lot of folks here know. Tobias Barrington-Wolf and Stephen Moses are also here with Alexis. So people are starting splitting these up. Some people have going to come to as many as they can, and we very much appreciate their doing so. And we'll make sure that we have a way for people to contact the working group directly on the website, so folks are able to do that without having to go through us. And the only thing I want to add before we start is, while Lisa is really on point, this is a big change for Palm Springs. It's not a change for how we normally vote. When we vote for the school board, when we vote for the college board, starting this year, when we vote for the Desert Healthcare District, when we vote for the state Senate or the Assembly or Congress or the US Senate, we're voting in districts. We're a representative democracy where you vote for your representative who then represents you in the larger body, which prevents the majority from picking everyone, which would be much more like a parliamentary system that you see in Europe and other places. So this is actually more consistent with how we vote for other offices. It's just something that will be new for the Palm Springs City Council. So it is something I want to remind people is familiar, just not for this specific office. And with that, I know our city manager, David Reddy, is here. So thank you for being here. And our director of communications, Emily Blaisdell, is here. So if you have questions for any of them, we have a bunch of staff who are doing all the AV here. So thank you. And Jarvis, who runs the center up here, thank you for being here. And our clerk has been through this before in South Pasadena before he came to Palm Springs. So Anthony, why don't we kick it off to you, and thank you.
So thank you for having me. I do want to point out the documents that we have available for everybody. So first off are these comment cards. So if you're somebody who's shy or doesn't want to make your comments out in the public, feel free to take these cards, fill them out. You can submit them to me. You can drop them off tonight, or you can drop them off at City Hall. You can email it, however you want to get it to us, but we do want to hear from everybody. So whether you speak tonight or you fill out these cards, if you are a Spanish speaker and you want to fill this out in Spanish, we will have it translated. In addition, we do have an interpreter here if anybody needs Spanish translation. Additionally, we do have voter registration in that room right over there. So if anybody needs to slip away real quick and fill out a voter registration card, feel free. So in addition to that, we have on the green sheets Spanish documents, and on the blue sheets English documents, which are a brief memo on what communities of interest are. And you're going to hear that term a lot tonight. Communities of interest is the focus of tonight's presentation. And then in addition, we have the schedule of other meetings that we'll be having through December. And then, of course, we have the PowerPoint presentation for tonight. And then last is this map, which is a public participation map. And as we go through the presentation, I'll be describing the three kind of levels of participation. The simplest and easiest is to use this paper map. You can just draw using a marker or crayon kind of the boundaries of what you think you would like to see a district to be formed as. And you can turn it into my office or to the demographer. And then we will take that into consideration, ensure that the city council receives the documents as well as your input, and so that they can take that into consideration when they're adopting the final map.
Excuse me, Anthony?
Yes.
Can we have the translator just in Spanish ask anyone if they need translation?
Yeah.
Just off the top. So,
Could you come up and do that?
or that.
Presente que hable español. ¿Alguien?
So with that, I'll go ahead and start the presentation. So I'm going to briefly describe that we are currently in an at-large election. So that means that the city elects each of the council members and the mayor at large. And so what we're proposing is that we transition to by-district elections in which the council member would need to live within the district that it represents, and then the members within that district would be the only ones voting on that council member. Currently, our city charter allows for a 5-member council, and that can be made up of 2 ways. It could either be 5 single-member districts in which there would be a rotating mayor, or 4 districts with a mayor at large. This is an illustration of how district elections are intended to work. As you can see, that if there is a minority group that's concentrated in a particular location, in an at-large election, you would see that they would always basically not be able to elect the member of their choice to the city council. However, if you were to break it up into districts, you could see that if there is a concentration of minorities, then that group would now have a stronger likelihood if they were to vote as a block in electing that member to the city council.
My turn. So these goals that we have are goals that were adopted by the entire city council. And the first is to maximize the goal of the California Voting Rights Act, including civil rights, equality, and inclusion. And I think I've already talked about how important that is. We want to prioritize the creation of majority-minority districts. And where we cannot create an actual majority-minority district, we still want to create districts that give greater influence to minority groups in those districts, so that it may not come to being an actual majority, but it becomes a much more significant plurality of voters. To the extent practical, we are going to try to keep all of our 45 neighborhoods intact. We think we have a great investment in our neighborhood organizations. They do an awful lot for the city, and they help organize events throughout the city, and people identify with their neighborhoods. So where we can, we will try to keep all of those intact. We want to maintain the principle that the best interest of the city as a whole remains the first responsibility of all elected officials. And we think it's very important that people always remember you have to put the city first, but that does not mean you're not representing your district as well. It is possible to take and do both. That is what we see every single day from our congressmen, from our state senators, from our assembly members. They represent their districts, but they're voting on issues that impact either the entire state and the entire country, and they have an obligation to take and work on behalf of that entity. Here it's the city. We take an oath of office not to defend the interests of our district. We take an oath to defend the Constitution and the city charter that we have. We want to, by process, evaluate our current structure of government, all of our demographics, compare them, learn from other cities. We like to believe we're like no place else, but we do have cities that we have things in common with, and we can learn from their experiences. And then ultimately recommend a structure of government that is the best to achieve the goals of CVRA and for our long-term needs. Our time plan for this is to meet with local neighborhoods and interest groups over the course of the months of June and July. And that is a time when we're going to be concentrating on questions of communities of interest. And one of the things we're really looking forward to hearing from you tonight, what neighborhoods do you want to be sharing a district with and why? What neighborhoods would you prefer not to be sharing a district with and why? And we don't think anyone here will be bashful, so please speak up, and nobody's going to get their feelings hurt. The second phase is something that we're going to start in late July and through September. That's developing maps. We will have an opportunity to look at maps that have 4 council districts and an at-large mayor, look at maps that have 5 districts and a rotating mayor. But that fundamental question of how we govern ourselves is going to be a decision that we will make at the first meeting in October and vigorously debate in the month of September at city council meetings as to what's the most appropriate form of government. And I am sure we will hear very strong opinions on both sides of that issue. Once we've made that decision in October, we will move to finalizing the maps. We will do that in meetings in October and November. And it is at the 2 meetings in December that City Council will ultimately finalize what the maps are going to look like moving forward to elections that will be held in November of 2019. And we will have 3 positions that will be up in November 2019.
So, as we look at the criteria used to draw these districts, the federal law requires that we have districts that are in equal population. And on these paper maps, you'll see the breakdown. When it comes to having a 4-district map, which would mean that we have an at-large mayor, the goal would be to try to achieve 11,138 people in each district. And there can be a variance of up to 10%, up plus or minus. However, the goal is to get nearest as possible to 11,000 in each district. And then with a 5-member district with a rotating mayor, the goal would be to get to 8,900 residents in each district. And then we go on to the Federal Voting Rights Act, and that primarily relates to ensuring that minority groups have a stronger voting power. So ensuring that there's no dilution of voting power for the minority groups. And then next is no racial gerrymandering, and so that's really an attempt to segregate minorities and weaken their voting power, and so that's also a criteria that is prohibited. Other traditional criteria include communities of interest, and we'll go into detail about what that means. Next is that districts should be formed in a way that is contiguous and compact as possible. That doesn't mean that they need to be perfect squares, but they can be longer rectangles, and obviously they're going to need to follow the natural flows of major roads and highways and things like that. But they shouldn't be, again, you may have seen it in some congressional districts where they look a little wonky or serpentine, and that would be along the lines of gerrymandering. They do need to follow natural and visible boundaries such as major roads, rivers, lakes, maybe the airport is a natural breaking point, other things like that. And then in addition, other criteria would include planned future growth areas. So if there's a particular area in the city that's expected to have a large development, and that those residents haven't been accounted for yet, the districts could take into account that population growth, as long as it's still within the variance that's allowed. So when we go into the definition of communities of interest, I hope you all take a look at that document that helps define it. But some of the normal or more common criteria include school attendance areas, natural dividing lines such as highways, roads, rivers, canals, or hills, landmark areas such as parks, or any other kind of landmark area. I think our downtown would count as a landmark area. So if you, obviously this park in particular would be a good example of a landmark that a community of interest that, congregates around, would be included. Common issues such as neighborhood activities, legislative or election concerns. Yesterday at the convention center, there was an excellent example. I think it was Kathy who pointed out that if you live near the airport, you might be impacted by the airport noise. So obviously that might be a community of interest for those that are impacted by that. In addition, there would be shared demographics, such as income level, education, linguistic isolation. And then what the council needs to know ultimately is what are the communities of interest that you identify with? And as the demographer is also attempting to draw maps, obviously that person's not a resident of the city. So we need to be able to provide him with input on what are the communities of interest that he can't see through the natural dividing lines, but that you all know are your communities of interest, and want to provide that input to the city council and to the demographer. And then a part of that question is whether or not a district should be united as one district, or whether it should have multiple council members that represent it. And for instance, that would look like the downtown. If you were to propose that either one council member would be primarily formed to represent the downtown area, or should it have multiple boundaries touching the downtown so that multiple council members are responsible for representing it? And that's a decision that the community needs to, or that's input that we need to hear from the community so the city council can make that decision. Now we'll talk a little bit about the demographic overview. So for the city as a whole, the Latino groups make up 25% of the population. Non-Hispanic whites make up 64%, and non-Hispanic Black and African Americans make up 4%, and then Asian Americans make up 5%. As you're using the tools that are available to you, you'll be able to drill down more specifically into either your into census tracts, and you'll be able to see what the demographic makeup is for that particular tract. And then you can also, as we go through the tools, you'll be able to enlarge that area. So let's just say Desert Highlands. You'll be able to take that entire area and then be able to see the demographic makeup for that particular area. And then there's a lot of other demographic information that's available through the tools. And as people are wanting more information, for instance, yesterday, somebody suggested that we provide information about where renters versus property owners are located in the city. We'll be able to have the demographer provide that map. And just like how we have these additional, what I call heat maps behind the paper map, we'll be able to provide that, whether it's for renters, income level, languages spoken, education level, things like that. So as people want that information, we'll be able to provide it. So where Latinos are particularly located in the city of Palm Springs, they're identified in 2 areas. One is in the Desert Highlands area, and then the second is just south of the airport. When it comes to Asian Americans, they're particularly located just south of the airport, kind of near the Demuth Park area. And then when it comes to African Americans, they're primarily located, or there's a concentration in the James O. Jesse area. So, as the Councilmember Middleton pointed out, we're going to try to have neighborhoods stay intact as much as possible. So inside the districting tools, this map will appear as a overlay so that as you're playing with the mapping systems, you'll be able to decide how to incorporate the neighborhood groups into the districts. So the map drawing tools. So we have three basic levels of mapping tools. The first one is the simplest, which is the paper map. And again, you can just use the paper map. The idea is to try to get to the population levels. However, you don't have to necessarily do that. If there's only one particular issue that you're focused on, you could just say that perhaps you want the desert highland area to be connected to another area and just circle that, provide us with a little bit of feedback. And then when the demographer takes that into consideration, he'll be able to draw maps that represent that. However, if you want, you can also use this map to try to draw all of the districts for the entire city, in which case, if you are going to do that, we just ask that you try to, again, achieve the population goals, as that's one of the criteria of the CVRA. Ultimately, you can submit these maps directly to my office or to the demographer. The only thing we ask is that you do provide a little bit of an explanation of what your map is attempting to achieve, so that when the council is taking it into consideration, they'll know what your focus was. The second level is using a Excel spreadsheet tool. So the Excel spreadsheet tool will allow you to go in depth about how you want to draw these districts. And so first off, there's two parts to it. There's the Excel spreadsheet and kind of a Google's map system, in which is pretty simple to use, and it's numbered. And so as you're looking at that map, you'll be able to say, okay, I want to put section 1 into a particular district, and then in the Excel spreadsheet, it'll calculate the demographic totals as you're drawing that map. The third is the most powerful system, and that's the online GIS system. This is what professional demographers use to draw districts for cities. We will provide a video. It'll probably be about 15 minutes, and it'll go step by step on how to use the system. If you have any questions as you're using the system, feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to assist you as you're going through the system. And if I'm not able to assist you, then we'll contact the demographer, and he'll definitely be able to assist you with the program. There are other tools. There's English and Spanish self-help guides that will, again, walk you through the process, in addition to short videos that will also answer any troubleshooting issues that you might have. So the focus of tonight's presentation, though, is to hear from all of you about communities of interest. Again, the City Council needs to hear about what are the criteria that you want them to consider when they're taking into account all of the various maps that might be submitted. And then, do you have a preference on whether or not the district is represented by one council member, or having multiple representatives basically touch, for instance, desert highlands? And then, what other communities of interest in the city should be considered while drafting the maps? So, I think yesterday was a good example. Somebody was saying that could you consider your shopping centers as, forming one district? So perhaps with Desert Highlands, if there's a particular shopping area that you use, should that be counted as a district, or ensuring that the park is part of the district, or other factors that the City Council may not be already considering that they need to know from you? Contact information is available right there. Feel free to email me or the demographer if you have any questions, especially using the system. It can be a little complicated. Feel free to give me a call. Please visit www.psdistricts.com. It has all of the updated information. It's constantly being updated with the schedule, new information. We're always putting new maps on there that will assist you in drawing these district boundaries. All of the GIS systems are going to be available online. Those will be launched next week. We're going to have that available in Spanish and English. So, and then I just want to give you some samples of what other cities have done. So for instance, this is the city of Pasadena. The city of Pasadena wanted to ensure that, again, their downtown had multiple council members representing it. So as you can see in the downtown of Pasadena, it's Colorado Boulevard. So what they attempted to do was to ensure that every council district touched it in some way. In the county of San Luis Obispo, because San Luis Obispo is the major population area for the county, they wanted to ensure that all of the county board of supervisors had a role on the major city. So with the exception of one district which just couldn't reach it, they were able to divide the county so that all of the cities, or all of the districts, touch the city of San Luis Obispo. And then last is from the city of South Pasadena. You can see that they decided to orient their districts to going north to south, and that's because their particular minority groups lived in the northern part of the city and also in the southern part of the city. And so in order to achieve a higher concentration of minorities within each district, they decided to orient those districts that way rather than in more of a square. So with that, I'll leave it to the questions that we're asking you and turn it back over to the council subcommittee.
Awesome. Just checking in. How are y'all feeling? That's a lot of information, right? A lot. All right. That's why the City Council is doing several of these meetings. So we encourage you, if this is something that you're interested, please continue to show up. Please continue to reach out, ask questions. The next portion of our evening will be hearing from you all. With the limited time we've had to process some of this information. But we would like to just open the forum and start the discussion and get that going. So I will be calling on each row and each section one by one to come up to the mic and provide some feedback. With the understanding, you know, if you're up in the first row and you don't have your thoughts together, that's quite all right. If I call the second row and you happen to not go on during the first row, please feel free to join us. And also recognizing that there are folks in the overflow room. And if you'd like a little bit more space, please feel free to be in there. So why don't we go ahead and get it going? I will first, however, read the questions posed to everyone here. And feel free to, you know, speak to whatever you're most passionate about, you know. So question 1. What is your neighborhood or community of interest? How would you define a community of interest for yourself, for your neighbors, for your community? Number 2, do you prefer your neighborhood be kept together in one district or have multiple representatives? And number 3, what are other communities of interest in the city that should be considered when drafting maps? So a really important point that Anthony made, the maps will be drafted by a demographer who's not from Palm Springs. So it's important that as residents, we give as much information that we feel is relevant to somebody who's going to be drawing a map for our region. They might not know the subtleties or the differences between certain communities, certain areas. So all that feedback is very, very important. And then, of course, if you have any other questions related to the presentation that Anthony gave or anything that Councilmember Jeff Coors or Councilmember Lisa Middleton mentioned, please feel free to raise those concerns. So I'll start with this. Yeah.
Can I just add, so when it comes to the demographer drawing the maps, I just want to point out that, yes, he's going to be drawing maps on behalf of the city, but we really do want to see the maps that are submitted by the residents. And the city council will take that into consideration. And whatever map ends up prevailing as being the best map, whether it's the demographers or a residents, is ultimately going to be the one that's selected. And then slight modifications may end up being made to that. But that's what this process is for. And thank you.
Great. So I'll just start right here in the first row. If anyone in the first row on this left-hand section has any comments, please feel free to come up to the mic so folks online can hear you, because this is being streamed online as well.
So my name is Daryl Baum. I live just over here on Via Escuela and Indian Canyon. So that's my neighborhood. It's not really, I don't even think it's part of the neighborhood, the 41 or 44 neighborhoods. It's that one area that doesn't have a representation. But yeah, I'd prefer the neighborhood be kept together. As far as communities of interest, I think it's interesting as far as the idea of bridging the districts onto the downtown area, but another consideration is to look at, from the business perspective, as far as the different areas of major business districts, so that they would be divided up, whether it be evenly or else tangentially, where you have, such as the downtown district, having multiple representatives on that, because that's such a vital part of our economy. So.
I wanted to point out a couple things. If you need the mic brought to you, just let me know and we'll bring the mic over. And also, if you have questions, this isn't a formal city council meeting, so the council or I can respond to your questions. And then if you still have comments that you want to make after that, feel free.
Hi, my name's Joy Meredith. There you go. Okay, so I did come to the meeting last evening and speak as well, but I think that some of the things, most of you were not at that meeting. So I live in the Movie Colony East neighborhood. I own a business in downtown Palm Springs, and I also own a business in the Desert Highland neighborhood. And so I think that there are a lot of different needs that everybody has here. And as far as the actual working on the map, I did try to work on that last night. And there are so many other little details that matter, like maybe financial demographics, trying to make sure that people that are more disadvantaged could be represented better. Right now, from what we have in your handout, it deals with 3 different racial communities, and I just think that if, to really make it right and to really be able to bring it up so that we could get other people engaged and wanting to run, that it would be best to have as much detail as we can. And there were some really good things that came up last night. I thought I had it in my purse, but I didn't, because it might be helpful if you let people know what was discussed last night as far as what sort of ideas people were throwing out there, just to get your juices flowing on what it is that might help to bring this out in the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy. Anyone else? First row on this side. All right, we'll come back. First row right here.
If I could just, so some of the ideas that were thrown around last night, as far as more information that people want to see and which will be posted online, is they wanted to see kind of the age makeup for the city. So I believe our demographer will be able to provide a heat map on the age differences within the city. In addition, we'll have renters versus property owners online. And then income level, that's the second time I've heard that, so we'll also ensure that we get an income level map that's posted online. So that's what I have so far.
First row. All right, we'll go to the second row right here on the left-hand side. Anyone? Second row, extending all the way, please.
At first blush, my comment may seem a little laughable, but I really don't consider it to be so. Considering the fact that we have an entire LGBTQ council and mayor, I would be concerned that, in number 3, that the LGBTQ community be represented, because I really do not feel that they are in a majority position despite the makeup of the mayor and council. I would like to see if there were demographics available on same-sex households that we could also take into consideration. Thank you. Bill Smith, William Smith.
Just quickly in response, I believe in the 2010 census, while there wasn't a LGBT-specific question, there was a way to identify if you were in a, had a same-sex partner living in the household. So if they're couples, that is some data we can get. My understanding is the current administration plans to get rid of that in the 2020 census, so we may not have that in the future. But the state actually has been asking questions in several ways, and that data may be available for us as well if we're able to use that. So Anthony, maybe just something to look at and what the state may do. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Rusty Kaplan. I'm his husband. I love maps, and I like picking landmarks up. I think there's quite a few mistakes on this map. Highway 111 is not where it is. That goes north on Gene Autry and left on Vistachino until it hits Palm Canyon. It's not written that way. And I think that you mentioned that you want major streets to be borderlines. And I think that that mistake could have a big influence on what people choose.
I think it's a little unclear as far as 111. Actually, if you look very closely, it shows 111 up at the north end where it is 111, and 111 down at the south end just east of Gene Autry, and Palm Canyon actually does become 111 at that point, but there's no indication of where 111 is as it moves through the city. On the color map, it's different? Okay, I'm looking at a different map here. So, and I have found some street names that were mislabeled and a few others, so we're trying to correct those wherever we see them.
And if you do see things like that, please email them in to the one of the email addresses, because that'll enable us to correct that. Thank you.
I want to mention that Councilmember Coors brought up the 2020 census, which is a good point that came up yesterday. So because the census is done every 10 years, there's a requirement in the government code that districts be redrawn every time the census is updated. So after the 2020 census, approximately March of 21, the city will be getting that demographic data, and then it will need to modify the districts again to account for the population shifts or the population growth within the city. And so, you know, that's just an important factor as we're drawing this. So there will be another attempt to redraw these boundaries again in 2021.
And where some of that is going to become most prominent is here at the north end of town, because most of the new development has taken place at the north end. If you look at the residence numbers for the Ascena area, it's very clear that that is dated information going back to 2010, but that's the census data that we have right now to work from.
Kathy Wormick, Anthony, isn't this updated to December of 2016? We have some additional data. And just to say, 26 might be it, because there were about, well, there's more. There were at least 50 voters in 15 in Ascena. But I think we're only a couple of years out right now, so some of the data is pretty good in terms of what we had, and we looked at whether or not we should try to update the newer areas and realize that since it was just 18 months, that this is probably as accurate as we're going to get.
I'll ask the third row, folks in the third row, the three here. If you have a comment, please step up.
You want the microphone?
No,
okay.
Well, I really don't have a comment. It's more of a question.
Sure.
Questions are fine as well.
Has the same.
Feel free.
I have no clue what a rotating mayor is.
Sure.
I get it. an at-large mayor, but what is it, for a certain length of time, or?
Sure.
That makes no sense to me at all.
What most cities who do that, they do one of two things. Either the council elects the mayor for a year, and usually it will rotate from one person to the next. So that is the way people do it. Yeah.
So I just to expand a little bit, many cities in California have a rotating mayor, and honestly, I've worked in 6 cities, and most of them have a rotating mayor. And so what occurs is there's a mayor and a vice mayor, and then each year the council members decide amongst themselves who should be the mayor for that year. And the mayor plays a ceremonial role. It doesn't have any more greater power than the rest of the city council members. And then in addition, under the city's charter currently, the mayor's role is primarily ceremonial in function and a spokesperson for the city, but a non-exclusive spokesperson for the city. But the voting power is the same among the council members. In addition, but it rotates, and typically it's a 1-year term, and then the next year it'd be one of the other council members.
And then folks in this third row, if you're ready, please line up.
Pardon me, just one sec. My name is Tobias Wolf. I'm one of the members of the task force. And I just wanted to build a little bit on what Anthony said, because this is a really important point. So the city charter provides that we have a 5-member city council now, today. And the mayor is a member of the city council, right? And Anthony said this, but I think it's worth saying again. The mayor of the city of Palm Springs doesn't have any power other than the power of a member of the city council, right? What the mayor does, according to the charter, is serves on the city council, votes as a member of the city council, and presides over the meetings, meaning, the mayor is the one who calls it to order and that kind of thing. Lots of cities, mostly much bigger cities, have a mayor who actually runs the city, right? A mayor who manages the city, a mayor who the city staff answers to directly. We don't have that in Palm Springs. And almost no cities in California, as small as Palm Springs, has that kind of managerial mayor. And so what the districting is looking at when we're going from these at-large elections of the whole city council to these district elections is about how we elect the members of the city council. But it's not about suddenly having a mayor who's going to take over David Reedy's job and be running the city like a manager. This is all about basically how city council is structured, with the mayor as a member of city council. And so when we talk about 5 districts versus 4 districts, what we're talking about is having all the members of the city council elected the same way, which is by districts. And then the reason that you go to this thing, a rotating mayor, is because when you have a city that's organized that way, the members of city council then have to select a mayor somehow from among their ranks to serve in that sort of ceremonial function, right? Versus having 4 districts where you're electing the members of city council and then electing the mayor at large in the whole city, but still just as another member of the city council, right? Not having any additional powers other than being a vote on city council and serving a kind of ceremonial function. And that, it turns out that one of the things that we are having an opportunity to do in this whole process is just talk with our fellow residents about how the government actually operates. And that's one of the things that I didn't know until I moved to Palm Springs. I should say, by the way, I think I'm the only part-time resident on the task force, so I'm a very proud resident of Palm Springs 5 months out of the year. And as soon as I can arrange my life so that I'm here all year, believe me, I'll do it, but I'm still working on it. But anyway, one of the things we discovered is that people haven't ever had occasion to have like an extended conversation about how the mayor works and how the city council works. And so that's part of our goal here. And lots of cities, I think the overwhelming majority of cities our size in California have something like a rotating mayor, where you elect the members of city council and then the mayor either is selected by the city council or it rotates through the districts, and there's various different options. But that's what we're talking about when we talk about that option.
Let me clarify something, because I think of a mayor. He's the guy in charge.
Right.
He runs the show.
And that turns out not to be the case in Palm Springs. That's not actually how our city works.
I never realized that.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sean Thomas Favreau, and I'm new to the neighborhood. Upon looking at this handout that you've given us, I'm just concerned about page 14, psychological impact of using the word only on the wording. It does have implications of segregating our neighborhood, and the word doesn't sound extremely inclusive and representative. So in the future, I would highly suggest that the word on the handouts be more inclusive, because I understand in the brief time that I've been here so far that a lot of the African Americans have been moved from the downtown neighborhood to this area, which implicates only this area, which is a problem. And me being new, and this is the first piece of information I'm getting from the city, it's not a welcoming understanding of this neighborhood that I've already have had in the couple of 6 months that I've been here. It doesn't look good. So I highly recommend the wording being changed, because then it lets other communities know that there's only 4% of us here, and it only doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's only 4%. So thank you.
If there's language that you would suggest, we would really want to hear it, because that's what we're trying to create.
Well, if you look at the language that you used on the other 2 pages, you might want to get a cue from that.
Thank you so much for that feedback. Thank you. All right, keep it coming. The 4th row in the back here, in case anyone has a comment, question.
I guess I just had a question. My name is Charlie Urban. I had a question. When are you guys going to implement this? And have you guys thought about, some of the communities have more seniors and not really access to the computer and so on and so forth. Have you guys actually thought about getting out to people who are disabled, people who don't have access to computers, people who don't have income to be able to get on the computer? How are you guys going to include them into the voting and into the process?
Well, we're certainly going to try to make sure that with the paper that we have, that anyone, whether you have computer access or not, can get to the data. The decisions, the most important decisions are going to be made in September, October, November, the final decision in December. So we do have some time to get out to all of the communities, and we will be available anytime to come meet with any group of folks that you can identify that we can get together with.
Okay, that sounds good. Because they're definitely probably going to need help. That map is pretty difficult.
We think we're going to break records compared to other cities for engagement, but we intend to do that, and we won't be satisfied unless we get out.
Okay, that's fine.
And every address in the city should have received a mailing about these and other ways to engage. But we are going to do, we're meeting with 1PS. We actually have a meeting where this is going to be discussed with at the Mizell Senior Center with senior providers to find out how we can reach the senior community. So that's a really good point. And we will do some outreach to the disabled community as well, which is important. So thank you.
And in addition, just brought out some good ideas is we'll ensure that we provide a supply of the paper maps at all of the community centers in the city. And if there is somebody who wants to use a computer but doesn't have one at home, they can always go to the public library, use the computers there. And if there's any need for assistance, I'm happy to either do it by phone, or if they want to come to my office, I'm happy to provide anybody with assistance in using the tool. It is complicated, but honestly, with maybe 20, 30 minutes of a little bit of a tutorial, it gets a lot easier.
Thank you for your comment. The 4th row on this side, if anyone has any comments, questions, please. Come on up.
I mean, is it because Palm Springs is growing? Palm Springs is growing, the amount of businesses that are coming in, amount of money that is being made, is growing. Amount of people that are renting out property. Step to the microphone. I don't want to.
I think just for the folks online.
Property is growing. So when I look at this, and it says like there's 5 city councils, you can have a rotating mayor. I'm sorry, but that don't make no sense to me. I'm very sorry about that. To me, each individual that is elected should come from the district that they represent. That way, we don't have any confusion. Everybody gets represented. The mayor it shouldn't be a rotating thing because everybody can't be a mayor. You know, and then you set yourself up for maybe businesses won't come into the area because there's no structure. But when I look at this and I'm here and I'm listening to you explain it, it's like garble, garble, garble. But I am computer literate. So for those of us who are seniors, who are not so computer literate, who are not so savvy as to what this garble is saying, to me it needs to be broken down a bit more. Because first of all, you have to understand you have a huge senior population here. A huge senior population, a huge collection of people who pay taxes here. You have a huge collection of people who work. And we get to work seasonal for some ungodly reason, I don't know. It's, it's just seasonal work, but we do pay our taxes. So, when you look at these and you look at these different neighborhoods and these different communities and you try to read the small print, you try to say, go to this map and go to that draw, I'm just a little concerned because the downtown, it seems to be growing. But what about the outlying areas? And then as you get people who come in and build, like they got the new addition going in over here, is that pushing other people out of the way? So my thing is, these meetings are great and these meetings are helpful for me to get up and talk about it, but it's like you're talking over people's heads. So a lot of people are not understanding what everybody's saying, and I just don't think it's really fair because, again, it's like taxation without representation. If you're going to represent me, then you need to break it down all the way down to where I can understand this and I can input my 2 cents and be accommodatable to me so I can say this is what we want. This is what the neighborhood wants. This is how it should affect me. But this is just me and my viewpoint because I'm listening and I'm really good at using the computer. But when I listen to you talk and I'm trying to read this, trying to go along with you, it don't make no sense to me. It absolutely don't make no sense. And like the young lady said, the wording where it says only, because in the James O. Jesse Center is not only African-American people. It is not only people in the Gateway community. There are other African Americans that lives in other parts of Palm Springs, and that needs to be recognized, and you need to find another way to say that. And when you say particularly, the Latinos particularly live over here, but you need to be a little bit more extensive because you all are the city council and you represent everybody in Palm Springs. So whatever areas you represent and what you should know, you should know. And when you come to the meeting, you should be more specific and know this is what area we represent, and this is who lives here and who lives here, because it goes from working class to people who are retired, to people in convalescent centers, to, people who are here part-time, full-time. You have to understand that people who've been living here all their life. So we have to think about that. We have school districts. We have all this stuff. So that's just my opinion. I'm going to go sit down because I get on a roll, and I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your feedback and for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. One of the critical, simple questions, what neighborhoods do you want to be joined with? What neighborhoods do you not want to be joined with? Yes.
How do you know what community you want to be joined with?
And then we're looking for which ones do you spend time with now? Who do you go to church with? Who do you shop with? Who do you go to the park with? Who do you go to school with? Who do you interact with? Who?
Then we kind of can circle back around into segregation again, because we're not And then again, also too, I mean, you just want to make sure that, I believe the whole purpose of this is to put everybody together. Well, to me, it seems like looking at the maps and things, everybody's segregated. It's still putting us back in the same situation that we've been in. And, you know, to have representation, it's fine, but still the person that we have to represent us, is that the person that we're going to have to actually represent us if we make up 4%? I mean, what is their say? So what will they have to offer in having the rotating mayors and things like that? I guess that's
And
just
some of that will come back to the individual elections, but we're trying to hear from you.
Right.
And make sure that we get it right. You've got questions, so do we.
So just for me, it seems like it's being segregated. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but it seems like this kind of segregation. I don't.
Hold on.
So
Can I?
1 second. So we appreciate all the feedback, all the commentary. We will ask if you could wait till you get a mic, so that way folks that are online can hear for access. But we want to continue this conversation, and it's really hard to have a conversation when there's only like one mic, right? So.
If I could please just, so when it comes to the CVRA, which is the California Voting Rights Act, it says that if racially polarized voting has occurred in the city, and what that means is if Latinos all decided that they wanted to vote for Christy Holstech, but she loses the race, then that means that my voting power in the city as a whole is too weak to be able to elect her. And so, for instance, sometime in the past, there was a candidate that may have been African American or Latino, and they lost, even though an overwhelming majority of that minority group, Latino or Black, voted for that person. And so the intent of the CVRA is to strengthen the power by breaking the city into smaller units, so that now when you go out to vote, if that community again decides that they want to concentrate their voting power onto a particular candidate, there'll be a higher likelihood that that person will get elected. So when we're looking at breaking up the city into districts, we're saying, okay, if you think that you vote more likely with other African Americans, then we should try to concentrate the number of African Americans in that district. But if that's not how you vote, if you think that you vote more along the lines of income level, and you want somebody who represents people who maybe you need rent control in the city, and you need a stronger rent control ordinance than it currently exists, then you're looking at a candidate who might be low income and has the experiences of somebody who wants rent control. And in that case, that's how you identify that you want that community of interest to be a higher priority than either income level or property owners versus renters or racial groups or other things. But the council needs to know from you, how do we strengthen your voting power?
Okay, my name is Monique Smith, and we, the Desert Highland Unity Center, want to be equally represented when it comes to our city council. We want our voices to be heard. We don't want someone that's just gonna go up there and have their own agendas. And question number 2, before you said all of that, to me it came off as you wanting us to choose for you, because everybody in Palm Springs knows that this is a predominant Black neighborhood. And somebody sitting here want to say they don't want to be with us, but they're not gonna say it as often as many times as you said, say what you want to say, it's not gonna happen. So somebody has to make the decision. So we're gonna make these maps and present them to you, but at the end of the day, if there is a neighborhood that has more clout than ours, you're gonna listen to them. So I'm sitting here and I don't agree with number 2, because we can't choose who we want to neighbor with because we don't know as much about them as they know about us. So I don't know how we're gonna get around it. I understand there's other factors that we're gonna use as far as age and wealth and renters and all that. but there has to be some kind of way to make this fair for everybody.
That's what we're trying to get. Thank you.
I'm Ola Roberts, and I'm part of the community. But all this information here was too much to digest in one night, and we need another meeting. Plus, we need to get more of our citizens that live here to come and be involved in this. We can't just vote for them because they're not here. They need an opportunity to come also and be here to represent themselves. We got a lot of senior citizens. So I just think we need another meeting. You come back out, not just give us one meeting. We need to read this for ourselves and digest what's in this whole article. We haven't done that because it was just quickly ran over tonight to me, and I can read.
We'll be back.
The last couple rows back there. Does anyone have any comments? And then I'll ask the folks in the overflow room if they have comments. To that point really quickly, so as a member of the working group, one of the things that I've offered, please step up to the mic if you have a comment. Like I've met with other folks as part of the working group, like one-on-one. We've just met up for coffee and we've like talked about these things one-on-one. Sometimes it's easier when it's a smaller group to make sure that everyone feels like, you know, they have time to ask in-depth questions, because it is a lot of information and it is a lot that we're doing. So like I'd like to offer, you know, I've offered Dixie that like I'll come to your house, you know, one day and like let's just go over it, right? So maybe that's one thing that the working group can look into, like how do we create these community spaces in a forum where it's not like 60 people and we only have 2 hours to discuss something, you know, like let's have coffee and let's like actually talk about these issues, knowing that it's going to take quite some time to get certain people up to speed, but it's important. And so I don't have any business cards. I'll run out to my car and get my business cards, and y'all can text me or whatever, and let's meet up, because that's part of what all this process is about.
My name is Steve Moses, and I'm a member of the task force. And as I heard the concerns in the later questions or statements, I think it's important to understand the purpose of districts is to give more strength and more value to the voice of people than they get if they're just one of a whole city. And the struggle we're having, and this is just the beginning to get it done, is to create districts, neighborhoods, areas of interest so that persons voting there have more of a percentage of probability of being heard. It's to give a better voice to the people who live here and the people who live there to say who they want to help them govern the city. And that is the whole purpose. It is a lot of information tonight. It is a lot to go over. I, for one, would be perfectly willing to have another meeting in this neighborhood, or more than one. And we're available to answer questions and to talk with you. We're trying to learn what does each area, each neighborhood want, so that we can properly combine them with other neighborhoods who are adjacent and draw those lines so that your voice is being unified. That's the intent.
Tobias, and then folks from the overflow room, if you want to come.
Thank you. I just want to echo what Steve said. I'm very happy to make myself available with probably some help from Alexis in small meetings with folks, you know, one-on-one meetings if that's what's most helpful. And let me just emphasize in particular, all the comments about you all are going about this the wrong way. That is why we are here. Like, we are not here because we think we know how to do this, and we're here to tell you how we're going to do it. We're here to get marching orders from you about how to go about, at the very least, advising the city council. And so questions about, you know, what kind of experience is it going to be for a neighborhood to go through this process of being put together with other neighborhoods? We need to hear that from you, and the city council needs to hear that from you. And the point that the lady made, that this is a neighborhood that a lot of other neighborhoods know more about us than we know about them, That is such an important observation, and I'm going to admit to you right now, that way of thinking about it hadn't occurred to me. And so that's why I'm here, is to learn from you all what kinds of things we need to be processing so that we can advise the city council the best that we know how. And so that your voices are the ones that, I mean, we're a conduit. Like, the point is not for us to have our views go to the city council. The point is for us to help get all of your views in front of the city council. That's the charge of our working group. And so if you're partly frustrated because you feel like this is a process that you don't know exactly, you know, what factors are going to be the factors that determine how these districts get drawn, that's, like, we don't either. Like, that's the whole point of this process. And you all explaining to us, here are the things that are most important to me when I think about how I want a district that I'm a part of to be put together. That's what we all need to hear about. And that's what we are going to try to advise the city council on and when they make the final decision. So thank you all for what you're doing, and keep on doing it. And I will make myself available to keep on having these conversations. Thank you.
My name is Wayne Gilchrist, and I'm a member of the community. The question I have is, why does the decision have to be made in October? Why can't it be delayed to allow us to do more research and determine what works best for the community?
So, under California state law, once the city decides to move forward with this process, we're supposed to get it all done in 45 days with 4 public hearings at council meetings. And that's what a lot of governments are doing. We actually reached out to the attorney representing the voting rights organization and said, you know, we need more time. This is very complicated. We're all learning this new for the first time. And I don't know anyone who's gotten as much time, but they agreed to give us till the end of the year to finalize everything. So instead of doing 4 meetings, you know, we're going to be doing a lot of meetings. This is the first set, you know, this week. But we're going to continue to do these throughout the process. We'll come back as much as people want and answer as many questions. But that is how the process works. Personally, I think 45 days for any government entity to do this is almost impossible. And it gets rushed and not done with the kind of input that we want to get. So we were able to get 7 months instead of that in order to do this. But it is, state law is the reason that we have that issue. Yeah, please.
And Jeff, it will be readjusted within the next 2 years for the next.
Yes, because the earliest this will have a vote in districts will be 2019. By the time there's an election in 2021, the districts will change. So we'll have some, that's when I think we'll have the experience and we can make adjustments, not just based on population, but based on how it's worked, how it hasn't worked. Because it is new for every single one of us to be going through this. None of us on the council have gone through it, and that's why we're out here. And in addition to the subcommittee, 2 other council members are here because we really do want input in how we think about this. And all the input's been really helpful tonight. So I really appreciate people speaking and people listening, because that's how we're going to do this as best as possible.
Hi, my name is Pastor Kroom. I pastor here in the community. And just a couple of questions. With our district being represented, number one, will it help us to erase some of the stigma that is in our community? You know, and I've heard people say, well, when you come to Palm Springs, don't go to the north end. Don't go to the north end. Will it help us to erase some of that because we have representation? And secondly, will it help more businesses to come into the community, because we know that we spend most of our dollars out of the community rather than in the community? So will that help businesses come, because we have representation, we'll have a voice?
You're going to have someone who's going to be elected from this area, and instead of having to answer to 40,000 people, we'll have to answer to about 10. And that means that the voice of the 1,600 people that live in this neighborhood is going to be much stronger with that, for that individual. And so that is one of the fundamental goals of moving to this, is so that every voice is heard at City Hall. And we'll be looking forward to working with you to make that happen.
Thank you. That was a great question.
I'm gonna hold you to it.
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir.
So I'll ask folks in the overflow room to please join, but yes, for those of us who are in this room, if you would like to come up, if you have a new comment, especially for the folks in the first few rows after some discussion, if you have a comment, I would please invite you up.
I'm just curious, because a lot of this is tribal land, and we are trying to redistrict it or just create districts. Now, because it's tribal land, and if we decide to have districts, there's a lot of federal funding out there for the various different things. And we have to even consider the businesses that come in. Now, we have to take in consideration that the tribes may not like some of this stuff, and they may not let businesses come in. So do we have to be concerned with that? Because we have to figure out where the checkerboard pattern is for the tribes in the area, just like they're making the post office move. You know, you hate to start something and the tribes step in and say no, or you try to get some federal funding and they say no, you can't get it because you're on tribal property. So does that play a role in this?
It could conceivably play a role. The tribe is not likely to get involved in what a district looks like. But when you start talking about communities of interest, bringing together a number of residences that are on leased land versus on fee land, certainly people who are on leased land have an awful lot in common and may want to be joined together as much as possible. We haven't heard that yet, but it's certainly something that we're listening for to get reactions.
And it might be that people on leased land might partner with some of the people who are on land that's not leased.
Correct.
You know, for protection, or you know, so they may be able to benefit partially in that district, because it may be an option where you be able to get something federally or anything, and you can't do it because of the fact you're on leased land, or it could be something that you could get something for the tribes, and they say they're not gonna do it because you're on free land. So it's a iffy thing, and that's something that's to be considered.
Thank you.
Any other comments from folks in the first row?
I just want to say one other thing, sorry. So there's something very exciting about all this, and I want to tell you what that excitement is that currently it costs about $250,000 if you want to run for office here. Is that accurate? That's what it's been costing. So look at this though. When you go now into districts, all of a sudden now you only need to reach 20% of the city if we go into 5 districts, right? So now people that before could not afford to run for office could run for office, regardless of these districts, okay? You and you and you and you and you and you, everybody would be on a much more level playing field to be able to hold those offices, not just be the citizens in those districts. And that, to me, I think, is something that is very important, particularly in this community, where it might have seemed to many that there would never be an opportunity to because of that income level. So all of a sudden now, there might be the opportunity to actually sit on the dais at City Council, not worry about who is sitting there for you, but you could be sitting there for you. So that is the bright side of this whole districting process, in my opinion.
Joy, thanks for that, because there is absolutely no question it's going to be less expensive to run for city council in the future in districts than it is to run citywide. And it will be much more important to reach out neighbor to neighbor, door to door, than it's been in the past.
My name is Ernie Stroman. Excuse me. Gerrymandering is very much in the news right now, and I'm wondering what kind of safeguards, if any, are in the process to ensure that it doesn't happen or to minimize the effect of gerrymandering?
Well, I mean, federal law prohibits gerrymandering, and if there is gerrymandering, anybody can bring a lawsuit to, reverse those maps. But ultimately, the city council's, as far as transparency goes, is going to ensure that all of the maps are posted online so everybody in the community can review those maps, provide comments. Those maps are going to be posted online. We'll have copies available as they're being published at the community center, so seniors who may not have access to those computers can still review those maps. I believe that we'll be doing another round of meetings once the mapping process is done, and now it's time to just review the maps. Those maps will be showcased around the city so that people can provide comments at council meetings or at forums like these.
Yeah. One difference probably, and yes, federal law does prohibit gerrymandering, especially racial gerrymandering, but it happens and the court allows it. So I can say that probably in a different way. California law is much stronger than federal law. California courts are much stronger on enforcing voting rights than federal law. And it's the reason the entire council unanimously set the top priority as achieving the goals of the California Voting Rights Act. And every map, we're going to look through that lens. Are we achieving the goal to end racially polarized voting and give more power to protected minorities? That is our number one priority for all 5 of us. We made that decision together. The working group recommended it unanimously. So I think there have been some bad federal cases, in my view, that have allowed gerrymandering to happen while saying they're not. And we're not going to do that here, and California does not ever allow that. And the courts have been very good in California on that. But it's an important point, because if you read the paper, you're realizing the Supreme Court has sort of allowed some bad gerrymandering to happen, and that won't happen here. But thank you for bringing that up, because I want people to know there is a real distinction. California law is much stronger than federal law. And that's a commitment we've all made.
Our goal is to make your voice louder.
Yeah.
And to that point, and certainly don't want to forget, the council made a decision a couple months ago to postpone making appointments to the boards and commissions, because during this process, we thought that it would be a great opportunity to synergize the recruitment for board and commission members along with these meetings that we're having right now. So in that table out there are applications to apply for boards and commissions, and then a pink sheet that describes each of the boards and commissions, when they meet, how the board is formed, and what the subject matter is of those boards and commissions. And again, that's a great opportunity for everyday citizens who don't want to run for an elected office to be able to influence the city council's policy decisions and projects that are implemented throughout the city. So the appointment process will begin in November and December, and then new members will begin their terms in January. So of course, if there's any vacancies that occur right now, those appointments will be made. So it's encouraged that you apply now, so that if vacancies occur, you'll be considered.
And just to follow up on that, if anyone here, or if you know anyone who's interested in learning more about the boards and commissions, what they do, what the time commitment is, please reach out. I'm sure everyone on city council would be happy to meet. I'm happy to meet with anyone and just go over the list, explain what they are, because that is a really good way, with less time than being on council. For those who work full time, being on council is a challenge, and we're also trying to figure out how we fix that. But if you're interested, please just reach out. I'm happy. I know Lisa, I'm sure Christy and Mayor Moon and JR would be happy to sit down and go through the list. So all of our emails are on the website. If you want my email, just let me know when we're done, and I'd be happy to meet with you on that. Yeah.
My name is Sid Craig. I'm on my 3rd commission, and I'm only saying this to encourage all of you. We are the public. We are the community. We're the people that make things happen in this city. And being part of it, I sit on boards and commissions with people like Dixie, who will tell you, being involved in this community, you have a voice. So when I hear people say they don't like the way things are being done, Joy and I have been involved. The people that get up and speak make a difference. So I encourage all of you, look at the list and get on a commission and get involved in this city, because our voice, start watching the meetings on Channel 17. We have a say-so. We're involved. We are the community.
Peter Crawford.
One of the things about the boards and the commissions that I always hear in the neighborhood is that the meetings are ran when everyone is at work. You can only be on a board or commission if you're wealthy or retired. We're working class people. We can't attend the meetings during the day.
Yeah. And thank you. It's a really important point. And the broader task force previously, and Lisa and I actually have proposals we're going to be bringing to council to have the meetings after work hours. Because, you know, a lot of city councils in the Coachella Valley meet in the middle of the day. And they're all like, you get so much more public comment. I'm like, because we do it when people aren't working. And so we really, it's going to be a discussion for council, but our recommendation is that we move them. And we need to get that done before this process ends, because it does, not only can it make it hard to serve, it makes it hard to come and testify. If you want to come and say, I don't want that project in my neighborhood, or, you know, we need this in our park, if you're working, you can't take off 3 or 4 hours from work to go to the meeting. So it's a really good point. It's something we are planning on recommending to the entire council. But thank you for raising that, Peter.
Please, if you if you have additional comments, please also remember we have the comment cards in case you're a type of person who doesn't want to be on a mic. There are comment cards that you can fill out. Anyone else have comments, questions? Yes.
What are you guys doing to reach out to the Hispanic community? Because the Hispanics are 25% of the population. I attended the meeting last night and tonight, and I don't see many Hispanics. So
We're going to be in Jamuth Park on Thursday night, and we are.
But they live up here.
We're reaching out as much as we can to every neighborhood and trying to bring folks in. So
okay.
If I could just summarize some of the marketing that we've done. Also, we've sent out mailers to all of the residences in the city. We've also done some marketing to have radio ads played on Spanish radio stations. We've had the media coverage with Univision or Telemundo, and we've hired a diversity consultant, and his name is Tizak. And you want to describe some of the other outreach you've done?
Good evening. My name is Tisok Daslan. He's mentioning what we're doing, and the council is definitely doing its best to make everything in both languages to outreach as much as possible. We're going business to business and throughout the city. It's a complicated process. It takes a while. So just like you're mentioning, you need more time. We do intend to reach out as much as possible, and there has been a disconnect. And throughout this process, this is exactly why the community needs to get involved now, so that disconnect does not continue. So your comments are incredibly important. We do hope that more Latinos feel the need to participate and they feel included in this process. And the council is doing all the steps up to this point to make sure that happens. So if anyone knows Latinos, you're going to the taco shop or whoever it is, we want to hear from them. If anyone's watching at home, your voice is important. We want you to come, so por favor, están incluidos.
Thank you. So the next meeting, similar to this in terms of a community engagement forum, is on Thursday. So there's a city council meeting. I don't know if this is on the agenda at all.
But it's very 2-minute comments.
So it's not the same setup, but Thursday there is a similar community engagement forum at the Demuth Community Center, which is over by Demuth Park. So the same material, same format for discussion, and that is
6 o'clock.
at 6 o'clock. And one of the things I wanted to mention with regards to Dieter's comment, and I think I mentioned this to you before, like I grew up on San Rafael, like I was born and raised there. I came to the Baptist church for preschool, and like all the folks that I know who lived in that area and like in Golden Sands and stuff, like none of them live here anymore, right? Like all my family has moved to Cat City. So T-Zock's point is like really, really powerful. If you know folks who are Latino who live, especially in some of these neighborhoods who aren't organized, right? Because not all the neighborhoods are organized. Please connect them to us. Please connect them to the working group, to me, because that's part of that. This is all part of the process, right? And like I'm a lifelong Palm Springs resident, so for me, it's not just about this process. It's long term. So like that's what I'm here for personally.
This is a complicated process, and just like not all African Americans live in this community, not all Latinos only speak Spanish. So the process is just about really community at large, and so everyone working together and talking to your neighbors and the people that you come across. So it really, the people in this room need to serve as ambassadors to the community at large. So, you know, if you can reach out to others, if, you know, the numbers grow from meeting to meeting, then we're doing a great job, and we'd love to see that happen. So, thank you.
And I brought up the Hispanic community because when you were asking the communities of interest, I think that we do have things in common with them as far as kids in the household, things of that nature, socioeconomic status, we're geographically close to them, CV link, whatever you have it, you know, and we don't want to be bunched in with Old Las Palmas, Little Tuskegee, and Vista Las Palmas, Movie Colony, and then we just lose our vote. We're already 4% as it is. So that's what we're afraid of, not being heard, whereas we haven't been heard for 60 years.
And that's exactly the comment that we need to know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That is exactly what we need to hear.
Anyone else?
Folks, we're trying to get this right. We're going to make some mistakes along the way, but we are here to listen and to learn, and we're going to stick around here for a while after this meeting's over so we can talk with you one-on-one. And I can't tell you it'll be perfect when it's all over at the end of this year, but we're going to do our best to get it right.
Thank you, everyone.